Hello, I'm Chuck Benoit. Welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. You know, when you change the word globalism to the word imperialism, something in your thinking changes. See, globalism is no longer a new thing. It's the old thing with a new name. Globalism if the war for independence that America fought 250 years ago was a war against imperialism. The idea that a nation can go into another area of the world and extract its wealth while leaving the citizens of that nation without the benefits of that wealth. America won that battle and in time created an economy that allowed the citizenry to become wealthy utilizing the assets of that nation. Now, I'm not an economist, but what I've come to understand is that the imperialist system was reintroduced to America about 100 years ago and has slowly been in the process of looting the wealth of America and, again, leaving the citizens of this country with economic lack. Now, I've heard the term controlled economic collapse as the strategy that's been in effect during this time. The idea that the world's citizenry must become less wealthy and not more wealthy. And this is the economic system that President Trump is destroying. He's weakening the global grasp of imperialism by creating a new alliance of nations intent on using national interests to create national wealth and allowing that wealth to improve the lifestyle of its citizens. The new golden age of America is being sold to other nations with the intent of creating a global golden age. And it does appear to be working in some capacity. Now, when it comes to the vision President Donald J. Trump has for America and the world, from my Christian perspective, it offers an incredible view of a not quite end time perspective. Well, with that, good morning, Mike Levine.
Good morning, Chuck.
How are you doing this morning?
My caption for the day is, "The heat is on."
Ooh, ooh.
So it's interesting, right? Saudi Arabia was very cooperative with the president and his little escapade in Iran until the president said that the Gulf nations really owed America a favor because we're cleaning up Iran over there for them. And a really good way for them to show their gratitude to America would be that they should join the Abraham Accords.
Yeah, why not?
And then Saudi Arabia starts saying, you know what? Maybe we don't want you flying into Iran out of our bases in Saudi Arabia. And maybe we need to restrict American access to our ports. So I'm saying to you that Saudi Arabia didn't swallow that big pill in one gulp.
No, I'm probably not.
So that kind of ties into your imperialism versus versus globalism intro, Chuck.
Yeah, there you go.
And I tell you something, I'm having a lot of fun, although I realize the magnitude of the stakes of the game in Iran, but I enjoy watching the back and forth. And I'm not going to get into the details other than to say that these negotiations are taking way too long. I think the president's being very patient with Iran. I'm sure he has a strategy for why he's doing that.
Yeah, I'm hoping so.
But I'm ready to get the show on the road. And of course, we did strike Iran over the weekend.
Yeah.
Big strikes in the mainland in Iran and Tehran over the weekend. So that's a big deal. So, we're into this thing, Chuck. There's no way to put the genie back in the bottle. You can't undo it. So I'm with the crowd that says, let's finish the job, Chuck.
Yeah, let's finish it. Let's win it. There you go.
All right, let's go.
So,
Now,
so we're in this special session over in Tallahassee, and Ron DeSantis is looking to eliminate property taxes, and he had a bit of a speech, I guess maybe at the end of the day yesterday or sometime yesterday, and we're going to kind of go over that kind of line by line if we have the time. So
all right, let's go.
Let's cut it up. So I think the first thing that we're going to say is that the economy here, the Florida economy, is up about 0.75 billion dollars under DeSantis's watch. Do you want to start there, and we'll go from there?
Well, obviously, I don't want to rehash what most people already know, but obviously, when COVID came around and Ron DeSantis decided that you didn't have to, what do they call it? You don't have to sequester in your house, right? All that, and we opened up our beaches, right? And did all the things that DeSantis did that the other governors around the country were not willing to do. Then people started pouring into Florida. So that's kind of the beginning of the whole thing. And now here we are with this massive influx of people into the state of Florida. And then the governor decides, hey, guess what? We're going to waive property taxes on homesteaded properties. Well, guess what? You're going to see a continued wave of people moving to the state of Florida when they think that they can escape property taxes in the other 49 states, Chuck. That's huge, right?
Yeah.
And just from a political standpoint, a very good reason that Ron DeSantis is going to suggest that you should support him for president in 2028. He has the most robust tax reform in American history in Florida. And that's probably a valid argument. So I'm going to tell you one thing right now, Chuck. No matter what Ron DeSantis' motivations are, and Ron DeSantis, I've been critical of Ron DeSantis in the past, but I am telling you that I'm liking Ron DeSantis more today. Because no matter why he's doing it, relieving taxpayers of tax on homesteaded properties is a massive tax reduction and a major increase in the quality of life of Floridians, and I'm for that, Chuck.
There you go. Well, he also talks about other tax relief that he's put into effect over the course of his time in office. I don't know how much time we want to get into tax relief on baby supplies and school supplies and disaster relief because we really want to kind of center in on the property tax stuff. He's also, I guess, frozen college tuition and refunded Florida prepaid dollars. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so for example, DeSantis said in his speech yesterday that they closed down the prepaid college plan and they had like $750 million in the fund. And he said most states would have just transferred that into the general budget. But under DeSantis's leadership, they refunded the $750 million back to the families who invested it. So I think that's just the right thing to do. But DeSantis wants to take credit for going above and beyond, saying that most governors would have kept the money. If I was a family that invested into the prepaid college fund and you kept my money, I'd be complaining.
Yeah,
but
there you go.
DeSantis thinks that he's doing you a favor by giving your money back, and I'll just be grateful that he did.
There you go.
Right?
There you go.
So I'm not going to give him a plus or a minus on that. I'm going to give him a par for the course.
There you go. There you go. Well, we're just kind of wanting to move right along to get to the meat and potatoes of what's going on. But I guess the idea of real estate values and how they're just rising like nobody's business. Why don't you talk about real estate values, how they're affecting things, and we'll just start there.
Okay, great. So, the first thing, I think that, most people probably don't really realize that, I think most people do realize that in Florida, there's a 3% cap on the tax, on the increase of taxable value on homesteaded property. So if you have a property that's $100,000 in taxable value and you filed the homestead tax exemption on it, it can't go up, the taxable value can't go up more than $3,000 a year. But what happens is when properties sell, then the taxable value is completely reset. So if your property that you paid 100,000 for, you sell it for 250,000, now the taxable value goes from, let's just say 115,000 to 250,000, which means at the time of transfer, the government um, reaps the benefit of an increase in taxable value by double. So the taxes paid to government when properties transfer often go up dramatically because of the transfer. So that is an example of local government getting major tax increase based on taxable value when existing properties transfer from a seller to a buyer. And then, of course, you have new construction that comes on, and that is taxable at its fair market value, basically. So as property taxes go up, local government gets a significant increase in revenue just by virtue of the resetting of the taxable value, Chuck.
There you go. There you go. And then he kind of talks about what could happen if you started from scratch or whatever. Obviously we can't, but just letting you know where I am in my little notes here. He asked, well, what if we started from scratch? What is his?
Well, I say we could.
There you go. All right.
And no, and that's a little bit
I get it.
Aggressive, let's just say. But I think that DeSantis is doing the best he can. This is a very bold initiative that he's putting on the table. But keep in mind, this did not start with Ron DeSantis. Actually, Senator John Martin from Lee County, I believe, actually was the impetus for this. He started talking about this 2 years ago. So while Governor DeSantis is getting the credit for it, I think Senator Jonathan Martin had a lot to do with getting this repeal of taxation on homesteaded properties into the fray of discussion. So, and obviously, the governor has to support it. He could kill it. So you do give the governor credit, but I think senators like Jonathan Martin out of Lee County, I believe, really were the beginning of all of this. So, that's that. So get me refocused here, Chuck.
Yeah, sure. No property tax versus consumption tax.
Okay, yeah, basically, so yeah. So if you were to reset the thing back to zero, I call that zero-based budgeting. Of course, you're talking on the revenue side, which typically when you talk about zero-based budgeting, you're talking on the expense side of the equation. But on the revenue side, Governor DeSantis is saying what most of us conservatives agree with, that if you tax people's assets, like their investment accounts and their properties, then you're basically taxing them on unrealized gains, which I would say is just wrong. It's just the wrong thing to do, to tax people on the increase in their wealth, because that would be an increase in unrealized gains. Your assets are increasing in value, but you haven't liquidated those assets, and the government wants their piece of the action on your unrealized gains, Chuck. And I find that to be a great problem. And Governor DeSantis points out that taxing homesteaded properties is an example of that. And I agree, Chuck.
Yeah, and again, the increase in realized taxes has a lot to do with population growth as well as inflation, right?
Okay. So what we're saying is that the taxation of unrealized gains is caused by population growth, which obviously if there's more spending, then there's more taxation. So by itself, population growth equals tax increases. But not only does it increase taxes based on consumption, it also increases taxes based on supply and demand. So, the housing people, the realtors, for example, are telling us that I haven't seen a report lately, but a couple of years ago, we were more than 1 million housing units undersupplied. So as you have an undersupplied housing market and people move into the state, then the demand for housing increases. The supply is already undersupplied. You cannot satisfy the demand for housing, so housing prices obviously go up. So increase in housing values based on population growth, which also increases demand, plus basic inflation, and we're seeing inflation all over the place based on gas prices. And of course, the Federal Reserve is responding to that. We'll see how the new Fed chairman handles interest rates. But if President Trump gets his way, interest rates will go down, which will fuel the economy, which will create more inflation, particularly in the housing market. So that's going to make this whole taxable property tax thing even more impactful, Chuck.
Sure. Now, also another claim that he made is that state level spending adjusted for inflation is down under DeSantis's watch, and that's along with
over the last. Go ahead.
Along with a lot of environmental restoration, infrastructure, teacher salaries increasing. That's a very interesting perspective. Why don't you elaborate?
Well, there's really two things going on there. Let me just refer to my notes here. What page are we on, Chuck?
2, bottom half. State level spending.
Okay, so we're talking about state level spending. Yeah, okay, that's where we are. So the governor has been saying in a couple of press conferences recently that while he's been governor, let's just say over the last 4 years in his second term, that per capita spending by government has actually decreased year over year for 4 consecutive years, Chuck. And I will tell you something, that's a big feather in the governor's cap, right? I mean, what more can you ask for when per capita spending is going down? That's very atypical of government. And Ron DeSantis is actually achieving that. So I give him credit for that. And then in order to make the case that local government can afford the reduction in taxing on homestead tax exemption, he goes into a long list of things that the DeSantis administration has invested in that are major investments, and still the state is able to do these big investment projects and still reduce spending. So he's saying that the state can do it, so can local government, Chuck. And he uses the Everglades Environmental Initiative as an example of a huge environmental investment that he's done within the constraints of the budget while lowering spending in Florida, Chuck. So he gives a couple of examples of that. That's what you were referring to, the Everglades project and some other projects, including teacher pay, by the way.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll talk a little bit about education here.
Is that what you want? You want to talk about education right now?
No.
Okay.
Let's just stay on the program, whatever you want.
Stay on the program, right. Well, he then kind of compared Florida services to New York services. And in case you're interested, on top of page 3 of our notes here, New York's New York's budget versus Florida's budget. 270 billion for New York and 115 billion for Florida. What say you, Mr. Levine?
I say that it's actually a joke to compare anything to New York or California spending. I mean, honestly and truly, I don't think you could find more corruption concentrated in a relatively small area than you find in New York City and Los Angeles, California. I mean, those are just, I'm talking about the corruption which results in I'm going to use, I guess people could go to jail for it, so I can use the word thievery, but that's what I equate it to. And when you look at all of the abuse that we're seeing around the country of, taxpayer money being literally stolen by non-governmental organizations and things like that, then you just get into all the back and forth and the corrupt business practices and things like that in New York and Los Angeles, and then you compare to the state of Florida, which we complain about, but in reality we are in fact far better off than the citizens of New York or California, Chuck. So the governor is just really comparing what we might call the actual best financial situation from state point of view in the country to the worst. So it's not hard to contrast Florida's financial situation, which is really excellent, Chuck, to New York's financial situation, which is horrific. And while they're spending more than double what we're spending, the quality of life in New York is horrific, as the news, well, as the independent journalist media reports on daily, Chuck.
There you go. So again, with all of this excess that we have here in Florida, we're also reducing our debt. We talk about what percentage of the homestead deduction is of property tax, and again here toward the top of page 3, if you're interested there. Hillsborough County went from $850 million budget to $1.6 billion in just a very few short years. That's like a double increase in their budgets. Why don't you address that?
Yeah, so what our viewers need to wrap their mind around is that when you look at the doubling of tax collections from property taxes over a 7-year period, and then ask if that doubling of taxes is commensurate with population growth and inflation. And Ron DeSantis is saying, and of course his chief financial officer, Blazing Goglia, is another one who jumped on the bandwagon. I would also say that Blazing Goglia was probably working with Senator Martin when this whole thing about eliminating property taxes came on the radar, because you know that Blazing Goglia is a big Doge local government advocate. So that's basically the analysis that the governor is applying here. He's saying that population growth hasn't doubled and inflation hasn't doubled, but property tax collections have doubled. And that's what's giving the governor and his supporters in the House and Senate the confidence that local government can absorb the reduction in tax collection based on the exemption of homesteaded tax properties being taxed, Chuck. I hope that helps.
Yeah. So moving right along, he also makes the claim that to eliminate the taxes on homesteaded properties would take our budgets back a mere 4 years. What do you have to say about that, Mike?
Exactly, and he actually paints the picture pretty clearly in his speech. He says it's not like we're asking local government to go back to draconian spending levels. This is the level they were at just a few years ago. But and he does acknowledge that there has been population growth and there has been inflation, but still he's saying that this is 2026, and if you implement the tax program that he's recommending, you're only going back to 2022 taxing levels. So it wasn't like, government was like broke in 2022. So I tend to be aligned with the governor's thinking on this, Chuck.
Okay. Yeah. Also, Mike, there's a discussion here between the legislature and the governor in regard to whether or not we should do this in phases. Why don't you give us a little information about that?
Well, the Senate President Al Britton told senators not to plan to be in Tallahassee very long. He said, we're going to get this thing knocked out and you're going home. So Al Britton is not interested in a long, drawn-out special session here. So what the Senate is saying is, we're not going to do the 200. We're not going to raise the homestead tax exemption from where it is now to 250,000 in one stroke of the pen. We're going to raise the homestead tax exemption from where it is now to 100,000, and then maybe next year 150,000, and maybe the year after 250,000, and maybe a few years after that we'll get to 500,000, and maybe in 10 years, over a period of 10 years, we'll be able to eliminate property taxes on homesteaded properties altogether. So that's kind of how the legislature is looking at it. I haven't heard much about Danny Perez, the Speaker of the House, version of how this elimination of homestead property tax should be managed, Chuck.
Yeah, I think I must have been Governor DeSantis basically said that at the 250,000 exemption, 65% of taxpayers would no longer be paying property tax. And of course, again, that could be DOA if the legislature is not unwilling to do that.
That's totally correct. But think about it, Chuck. When you're talking about people who live in, I'm saying to you that I would venture to say the median house price today is probably higher. I don't know, 250,000 could be the median home price today. It could be higher.
I think it's higher.
Okay, so there you go. So what you're saying is that really the most, if the value of someone's home is reflective of their economic status, then you're really saying that reducing property taxes on properties or eliminating property taxes on properties that are $250,000 in taxable value or less, you're really helping the people that need it the most, Chuck. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. Now,
so I'm for that.
Now, the state of Florida has a surplus, and Governor DeSantis is talking about creating a trust fund to help any counties that have issues, and that would be like a grant process. Any comments on that?
Chuck, I don't like shifting power to the state government from the local government because obviously you're going to have to apply for those grants, and state government's going to decide whether you get the grant money or not. And that could be decided based on who you run for office in the Florida House and the Florida Senate. So if you support our establishment candidate, then we'll give you the grant funding you need. And that happens all the time, Chuck. So that really makes me nervous. But local government does need a mechanism by which they can cover deficit spending for sure. And I believe that the local government could do that without the trust fund simply by requesting appropriations in the legislative session. So do we need a trust fund? But long story short, I'm not opposed to the trust fund, but I really hate giving more. I hate having to crawl on my hands and knees to state government to get the money that we deserve here locally, Chuck.
There you go. Well, I'm trying to just move right on through, just have a few more minutes. Talk about the impact that on some counties who really don't have significant commercial and investment properties to continue to be taxed.
Well, Chuck, Lake County is actually one of those counties. I mean, ever since I've been involved in Lake County politics since 2010, we've always, everybody who is running for a county commission seat or something, I have a particular commissioner in mind who's no longer a commissioner, who used to talk about this all the time, that the funding of government is on the backs of homeowners. Because Lake County, as a proportion of commercial versus residential tax base, is lower. The taxable value of commercial property compared to the entirety of property tax collection is a lower number than it is in other counties like Orange County, for example. Orange County has a big commercial tax base, so a higher percentage of the property taxes collected in Orange County comes from commercial than compared to Lake County than residential. So Lake County is one of those counties where we're heavily, invested in residential properties and less invested in commercial. So this will be a bigger impact on Lake County than it will more urban counties like, we could say, Orange County, Broward County, Miami-Dade County, Duval County, Pinellas County, for example, probably have higher ratios of commercial to residential property tax base, Chuck.
We are very, very quickly running out of time, but the legislature proposed a $750 million annual rainy day fund growth, and DeSantis opposes that. Why don't you explain how that might impact on what we're dealing with here?
Well, basically, the legislature would like to see, as you pointed out, $750 million a year taken out of the state budget and put into the rainy day fund. But in reality, Governor DeSantis agrees. Let's just flip this around and make it the way it is and put it in perspective that I agree with Governor DeSantis that the rainy day fund should be a percentage of the budget. And once you hit that percentage, then you shouldn't add to the rainy day fund anymore because you're just basically overtaxing people. So you take money from taxpayers and put it into a savings account in government, but that money needs to be working in the economy, not sitting in a bank account or investment account for the state. So my point overall would be that the rainy day fund should be a specified targeted amount, and you fund the rainy day fund up to that amount. And then after that, you give the money back to taxpayers, Chuck. So I oppose taking $750 million arbitrarily out of state funding and dropping it into a rainy day fund for the sake of saving money, Chuck.
Well, we've almost gotten through our notes here, but very, very quickly, the impact on schools, because obviously when you're talking about property tax, you're talking about schools. And what we have here is a decline in student population, teacher pay, I'm not sure what we're talking about there. County misuse of funds, bureaucracy abuse, administrative abuses. What say you on regard to impact?
So basically what Governor
schools?
DeSantis is saying is that the state of Florida set aside a budget for teacher pay increases. And he's saying that when he sent the money to the counties, the county didn't use the money for teacher pay increases. They used the money partially for teacher pay increases, but also for increases in bureaucratic initiatives and administrative initiatives. So the governor isn't too happy with some of the counties who have misappropriated the funds that the state provided for teacher pay, assisting the counties in recruiting teachers into the profession. And he says that there's some abuse there. And of course, basically, Chuck, a couple of days ago, you and I weren't sure whether or not the governor's proposal included the abolishing of property taxes for school assessments, and it does include that. So basically, the schools who feel like they're being pinched already because they get paid based on student population, so the school system, the county school boards, believe that they're already working with a restricted budget because their student populations are decreasing. And now the governor comes on board and says, yeah, we're also going to cut out the school assessments from homesteaded property tax assessments. And we can get into a longer conversation about that when we have more time. But again, I agree with the governor on this particular point. Chuck?
Well, why don't you take us home with this comment that you finished up our notes with, which is homestead tax reform requires our full attention. Mike, take us home.
Okay, so basically, some people are asking, why did Governor DeSantis wait until the session was over and the special session that was called to deal with the budget had concluded before, and then required him to call another special session to deal with property tax relief? And the governor just said, this is such a major initiative, which I agree it is, that he doesn't want the legislature thinking about anything else when they're considering the abolishment of of taxes on homesteaded properties. And I totally agree with the governor. If you would have done this in a regular session or in a special session where there were 3, 4, 5 different agenda items, then the legislature would have been unable to focus their full attention on this particular project, which is obviously very important to Governor DeSantis, Chuck.
Well, Thank you, Mike Levine, and thank you all again for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook and X at Restore Our Rep 76. Check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Please like and share the program. And remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.